Chapter 2. The Birth of Old Bean. The last echoes of laughter faded into the night as a silent figure emerged from behind the great hearth. For a moment, the glint of emerald eyes was visible in the darkness. Then it was gone, replaced by the clouded gaze of an elderly man who stepped into the light with careful, measured movements. Old Bean had returned, as if he had merely stepped away for a moment rather than vanishing in a spectacular display of leprechaun magic. None remained in the common room to witness his reappearance, except the innkeeper, who was still examining the silver coin with fascination.
"Ah, there you are,"
the innkeeper said, looking up.
"The children were quite worked up about some magic trick you performed. Said you turned into a leprechaun right before their eyes."
He chuckled, clearly not believing a word of it. Old Bean smiled, the expression gentle and innocent on his weathered face, his voice once again carrying the rougher cadences he had adopted for this persona.
"The imagination of children is a wondrous thing," he said. "Give them a good story and a bit of firelight, and they'll see all manner of magical beings."
The innkeeper nodded, sliding the coin into his pocket.
"Well, whatever you did, you've given them something to chatter about for weeks. Will you be needing anything else tonight, Bean?" "Just a moment more by the fire," the storyteller replied, lowering himself into the nearest chair with a grunt of stiffness. "Then I'll see myself to bed."
As the innkeeper returned to his duties, Old Bean gazed thoughtfully into the flames. The transformation from leprechaun to elderly human had become second nature over the years, but tonight's revelation had been a calculated risk. Children were likely to be believed only by other children when they spoke of magical beings, yet the silver coin might raise questions. Still, the occasional hint of his true nature added to his mystique as a storyteller, and mystique was good for business. When the room emptied and the fire burned low, Old Bean shuffled through the narrow hallways to his chamber. The door creaked as he entered, and at once a rush of familiarity swept through him. The knot in the oak floorboards near the wardrobe, the odd angle of the ceiling beam, the iron fittings of the window latch, blackened with age. He set his hat on the table and allowed himself a small smile.
"Well now, of all the rooms in all the inns."
But it was the very same chamber where he had first created his Old Bean disguise. The coincidence delighted his trickster's heart. The current innkeeper had been just a child then, Herman recalled, running through these very halls while his father managed the inn. Now that boy was grey-haired himself, serving drinks below and utterly unaware that the same magical beings still frequented his establishment, unchanged by the years that had weathered the human. The thought tickled Herman's trickster heart. He crossed to the window and peered into the night. The voice of a watchman drifted faintly up from the street. For a long while, Herman stood there, letting memory settle over him. The last time he had occupied this room, he too had been at a crossroads, his reputation catching up with him. Turning back to the table, he drew out a small pouch. Silver coins spilled into his palm, their surfaces glimmering faintly with enchantment. He rolled them from hand to hand, the familiar weight grounding him as his thoughts slid backward into the past. Years ago, in this same room, the fire had burned low, the night thick around the inn. Herman Green, still raw from the sting of his transformation from human king to leprechaun trickster, felt the world pressing too close. Merchants whispered of silver that turned to leaves. In taverns across the 7 counties, his name was traded like coin in the dark, valuable, volatile, and never quite what it seemed. His leprechaun form was too obvious, too recognizable. Wherever he went, suspicion followed. Something had to be done. From his enchanted hat, Herman drew what he needed. A vial of shimmering liquid, 3 strands of unicorn hair, a moonlit mirror fragment, and a midnight 4-leaf clover edged in gold. He set each item beside his greatest treasure, an enchanted mirror taller than a man, its dark frame carved with fey runes. Unlike ordinary mirrors, this enchanted-looking glass showed not just one's reflection, but hints of one's true nature. In it, Herman could see not only his current form, but flickering shadows of the human king he once had been. That had been another life. Before his transformation, before his obsession with gold had led to his downfall at the hands of magic he didn't yet understand. Sometimes, in quiet moments like this, he could still feel the phantom weight of a crown upon his brow, the remembered breadth of shoulders that once stood as tall as an oak. Herman stared at his dual nature, once a tall-crowned king, now a small, sharp leprechaun with curling red hair.
"From ruler to trickster," he mused. "Quite the fall from grace, wouldn't you say?"
He crushed the clover, letting its sap drip into the vial, then added the unicorn hairs which dissolved in shimmering spirals. As he worked, his mind drifted through centuries of consequences. Shadow sprites, mountain trolls, river nymphs, all victims of his silver-tongued promises and cleverly worded contracts. His reputation had grown, as had his collection of enemies. There were beings across the realm who would so dearly love to catch the leprechaun who had tricked them, some seeking their stolen gold, others a more permanent form of revenge.
"Always consequences,"
Herman sighed, mixing faster now as the concoction began to glow with blue light. Placing the mirror shard against the larger glass, both pieces hummed with resonating magic. Herman traced ancient symbols in the air, his voice rising in old fey rhythm.
"Show me a form that eyes will pass over,"
he commanded, his voice taking on the musical quality that emerged when leprechaun magic was at its strongest.
"Age these features, bend this back, silver this hair and cloud these eyes, not to blindness, but to the appearance of one who sees only what others expect. And most importantly," he added with special emphasis, "stretch these limbs to tower where once they were small."
The mirror rippled like water. His vibrant red hair faded to silver white, his smooth features weathered and lined with age. His straight back curved into a slight stoop. The green of his clothing muted to earthy browns and greys, still magical in nature, but no longer proclaiming his leprechaun identity to all who saw him. Most significantly, his height increased dramatically from the diminutive stature of a leprechaun to that of a tall, elderly man who might once have been imposing before age bent his frame. Where the authorities sought a small, nimble trickster, they would never suspect a lanky old man whose head stood above most of the crowd. When the magic settled, Herman touched the glass. The transformation flowed from reflection to reality. As the disguise settled over him, Herman felt something unexpected. Relief, not just from hiding, but from the freedom to be someone new. King Herman had commanded through fear, Herman Green tricked for survival. But this persona, this old man, could move through the world without suspicion, without fear. Perhaps this disguise offered more than just safety. He paced the room, testing his stride. The longer frame was unfamiliar, but he adjusted quickly. He spoke aloud, letting his voice crack and waver until it matched his new appearance.
Ah, yes, an old man indeed, weathered, harmless, full of stories and nothing more.
Then came a final touch. A name. It could not be grand or memorable. His lips curved into a smile.
Bean,
he said, chuckling at his own wit.
Old Bean, unremarkable as a vegetable, common as dirt.
Herman, now Old Bean to anyone who might see him, carefully tucked his magical ingredients back into his hat's infinite interior. The transformation spell would hold indefinitely, requiring only a small renewal of energy each dawn. He could shed the disguise at will when privacy allowed, but in public, he would be nothing more than a wandering elder, perhaps a storyteller or minor trader in herbs and remedies.
A storyteller, he repeated,
finding the idea particularly appealing.
What better cover for a trickster than someone expected to spin tales? And what better way to build my legend than to tell them stories of the elusive Herman Green, the leprechaun trickster that no one can catch?
The irony pleased him immensely. He would hide in plain sight, building his own mythology while gathering new marks and new opportunities. They would search for Herman Green the leprechaun. They would never see Old Bean the storyteller. Standing before the mirror, he bowed low.
And so begins the tale of Old Bean.
That night, for the first time, Old Bean walked out into the world. Back in the present, Herman's reverie was broken by commotion in the square below. Moonlight poured across the wooden floor as he rose and crossed to the window. New notices were being posted. Wanted posters, bearing an uncomfortable resemblance to his true form. He descended into the square with caution. The notice confirmed his fears. The Emerald Trickster, Herman read from one particularly detailed poster, wanted for fraud, deception, and magical mischief across the 7 counties. Distinguishing features: green attire, red hair, silver tongue, short stature. Approach with caution, known to disappear when confronted. His reputation had spread further than expected. The sketches were becoming sharper, too.
Too famous for me own good, he muttered. Time to let Old Bean earn his keep.
Yet fate pressed close when a trickster grew comfortable.
Stop there!
A voice called. Herman froze. A night watchman stood in the corner, lantern raised high. The man's face was contorted with recognition and triumph.
It is him! I found Herman Green! Sound the alarm!
The watchman bellowed.
I found Herman Green!
Bells began to toll throughout the village, a sound Herman knew all too well from previous close escapes. Lights appeared in windows as curious villagers were roused from their beds. Worst of all, he could hear the distinctive clatter of the town guard assembling, their boots pounding on the cobblestones as they converged on his location. Herman sighed.
Splendid timing.
He could transform back into Old Bean, but the watchman had seen him clearly. Changing now would only confirm the magical nature of his disguise. No. He needed distance first. Herman took off running, his pointed shoes barely making a sound as he fled. He might be small, but leprechaun legs were designed for speed and agility. He darted down a narrow alley, vaulted over a stack of crates, and emerged onto a wider street, only to find it blocked by 2 guards approaching with drawn swords. "No need for those," Herman called cheerfully, skidding to a halt. "I am merely out for an evening stroll." The guards were not amused. They advanced slowly, their blades glinting in the moonlight. Herman spotted a market stall's striped awning and ran forward, leaping onto it and using the canvas as a springboard to reach the rooftop above. "After him!" came the shout. Herman sighed to himself as he scampered across the sloped tiles. "So predictable of me." He leapt from building to building, the gaps between each one a heart-stopping moment of flight before his feet found purchase again. "Always the roofs," Herman muttered as he ran. "Why do I always end up on the roofs?" He bounded across the rooftops, his small body darting through the air before landing in silence. The town square loomed ahead, too wide to cross, but thick with villagers drawn by the noise. Perfect. A crowd was as good as a cloak. He slid down the tiles and dropped behind barrels, hidden for a heartbeat. In that pause, he whispered the spell. The glamour washed over him, bending his frame, stretching his limbs, clouding his eyes. By the time the first guard rounded the corner, Herman Green had vanished, and only Old Bean remained, blinking in confusion. The guards halted. One leaned close, lantern lifted. "Oh, man! You seen a leprechaun run through here? Small fellow, red hair, green coat." Old Bean squinted, his cloudy eyes darting about. "Oh, a leprechaun, you say? Oh, my word, that would be something. Afraid my eyes are not what they were. Might have been a cat, might have been a boy. Who can say?" The guard cursed and moved on. Old Bean shuffled into the crowd, just another confused elder. No one suspected. No one looked twice. When the captain of the guard arrived, he questioned bystanders, eventually pausing before Old Bean. "You there? Did you see a small green man?" Old Bean tapped his cane against the stones. "A leprechaun? I might have heard stories, but never laid eyes on one myself. Oh, mischievous little things, are they not always? Vanishing coins and slipping away just when you think you've caught them." The captain's eyes narrowed. "I didn't say leprechaun." Old Bean blinked, his clouded eyes widening with what appeared to be confusion. The other guard, he mentioned it earlier, asked about a leprechaun with red hair and a green coat. My old ears, they catch fragments." He tapped the side of his head apologetically. "Gets all muddled together, you see." The captain studied him for a long moment, suspicion flickering across his face. Then he dismissed Old Bean with a wave. "Report anything strange at once." When the guards finally dispersed, Herman allowed himself a private smile behind the mask of age. Once again, his greatest trick had saved him. The search continued for hours, but of course Herman Green was nowhere to be found. By dawn, the guards had given up, returning to their barracks to report yet another failed attempt to capture the elusive trickster. Old Bean, meanwhile, had found a comfortable bench in the town square where he dozed like an elderly citizen might after a night of excitement. Later in the day, Old Bean sat on a bench in the square, looking for all the world like an old man too stiff to rise. While the disguise was effective, it was rather like wearing an ill-fitting suit, functional, but never quite comfortable. When the market opened, he shuffled among the stalls. One cart caught his attention. Frozen sweets sold in little cups. Children gathered with eager coins. Parents smiled and no trace remained once eaten. Perfect. Quick coins, instant consumption. No evidence.
Sherbet,
Old Bean murmured, leaning on his cane as he shuffled away. The idea crystallized. A new town, a new trade. Children would flock to him, parents would trust him, and coins would fill his purse as quickly as treats vanished from eager hands. And if those coins later turned to leaves, the sweets would be long gone. He chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling with mischief beneath their clouded disguise. Sherbet, magic, and vanishing coins. What could possibly go wrong?